What's going on, guys? Back with another one for you today. And today I got the 6 players I absolutely refuse to draft in fantasy football so far this year. My last video was the 7 guys I couldn't stop drafting, so if you haven't seen that one yet, I'll link it in the description so you can go check it out. But without further ado, let's just get right into it. The first player that I absolutely refuse to draft so far this season is Chris Olave. He's currently going off the board on Underdog Fantasy as the 11th wide receiver and the 16th overall player. And I simply just can't justify selecting Chris Olave before wide receivers like Nico Collins, Brandon Ayuk, Jaylen Waddle, Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, Devontae Smith, Deebo Samuel, or even running backs like Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, and Devon Achane. While I understand that Chris Olave is a very good player and everybody is projecting a third-year breakout here, there's simply no way he should be going before those guys, in my opinion. He remains in a very bad situation on an offense with a bad quarterback that's only got worse this offseason with some major losses to their O-line, along with the loss of Michael Thomas. I know a lot of people might be debating whether Michael Thomas is really a loss or not, considering he's always hurt and he doesn't play much, but when Michael Thomas was healthy and playing, he drew major attention away from Chris Olave, so personally I will still be counting that as a loss. And while I understand everybody's excited about the Kubiak hire and how this offense is going to be a much better fit for Chris Olave and his skill set than whatever they were running out there last year, this is still an offense that projects to be one of the worst in all of football, who also happen to be projected bottom 8 in scoring this season. And then when you look at last season, somehow, someway, the New Orleans Saints were a top 10 scoring offense. Yet despite that, Chris Olave finished just as wide receiver 19.5 PPR while being wide receiver 21 in fantasy points per game. So now on an offense projected to be much worse, he's expected to significantly outproduce what he did last season. I'm just not buying it. I know a lot of people are also going to say to me, well, Derek Carr was hurt last season. Derek Carr played the entire year hurt. Well, cool. So now instead of being bad and injured, Derek Carr is just bad, right? So I personally just have absolutely no trust in Derek Carr and the Saints offense to be able to justify Chris Olave's price, and personally Derek Carr's ability at this stage of his career to be able to support a massive Chris Olave breakout. So at this current moment, I am fading Chris Olave at current cost by any means necessary. If he starts to fade towards that back end of the second, I will absolutely start taking some Chris Olave, but I think he's significantly overpriced at this point in time. At number 2, I have Hollywood Brown, currently going off the board as wide receiver 32 and 51st overall. I understand the excitement for a player with Hollywood Brown's skill set paired with Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, and this Chiefs offense. However, I just think he's going too high. While yes, I understand the Chiefs offense is more than likely going to go back to a much more pass-heavy approach this season with Kels, Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown, and Rashee Rice, assuming his suspension won't be the entirety of the year, I believe that Hollywood Brown is more likely to be the 4th option on this team than he is the 1st or 2nd. I'm projecting a massive bounce-back season for Travis Kelce with the addition of the added protection around him, and I fully expect Isaiah Pacheco to still be a massive part of this Chiefs offense. The Chiefs also, after signing Hollywood Brown, immediately turned around in the first round of the draft, trading up to make sure they secured Xavier Worthy in the first round, a player with a very similar skill set to Hollywood Brown. Meanwhile, Hollywood Brown's only on a 1-year deal, so I personally don't expect Hollywood Brown to be able to keep Xavier Worthy, a first-round pick, off the field for the entirety of the year. So now let's get into Rashee Rice. While I still expect him to be suspended at some point this season, I don't expect it to be any more than 6 games. And if that's the case, what happens to Hollywood Brown when Rice comes back? To me, it relegates him to the 5th option on this offense behind Kels, Rice, Pacheco, and Worthy. Even if Rice happens to be suspended for the entire year, I believe that by the end of the year, when games matter more, the Chiefs will start taking Hollywood Brown, the guy they have minimal investment in, just a 1-year contract, off the field more in favor of the first-round rookie, who also happens to be the fastest player in NFL history as well. I also understand the last time we saw Hollywood Brown with an elite quarterback for an entire season, he finished that season as the wide receiver 21 in fantasy points per game, which is obviously significantly higher than he is being drafted right now. However, that was as a clear-cut number 1 wide receiver in his offense, with his only target competition coming in the form of Mark Andrews. I would much rather have Worthy a few selections later or take the chance on Rice that his suspension is minimal or perhaps doesn't get suspended until 2025 over Hollywood Brown at his current price. Also, if we just look at some of the players that Hollywood Brown happens to be going around, for example, guys like Dalton Kincaid, who looks to be in line to be Josh Allen's clear number 1 option in this Buffalo Bills passing offense. Josh Jacobs, a starting running back, getting a massive situation upgrade on one of the best offenses in all of football, Keenan Allen, who was just wide receiver 3 in points per game last season, who happens to be getting a situation upgrade as well, going from the Chargers to the Bears. Jaden Reed, the guy I expect to be the number 1 in Green Bay this season. Anthony Richardson, the guy who could absolutely break fantasy football at the quarterback position this season and finish as the overall number 1 quarterback and the overall number 1 player. James Cook, a running back in a great situation who looks absolutely primed for a massive breakout. So I just think all those guys are much better options than Hollywood Brown at his current cost, and I would just much rather be investing into some of these other Kansas City Chief pieces than I would be Hollywood Brown. Moving on to number 3, I have Jordan Addison. Currently going off the board as wide receiver 39 and 66th overall. And I know this doesn't seem like a steep price for a second-year wide receiver you should expect positive regression from. He just happens to be going ahead of guys like DeAndre Hopkins, Rashee Rice, who we just touched on, Ladd McConkey, Brian Thomas Jr., Deontay Johnson, Christian Watson. And to me, all those guys are either better players in better situations or are tethered to better quarterbacks. I also expect a fair bit of negative regression from Jordan Addison this season, considering in 2023, his rookie year, he accumulated a wild 32% amount of his fantasy points only off of touchdowns, scoring 10 through the air. And like I said, while I expect that to be reeled back in a little bit this season, he will also be competing for targets with a healthy Justin Jefferson in an offense that will either be run by Sam Darnold or rookie J.J. McCarthy this upcoming season. So how much passing volume will there really be to go around? And while I know everybody is going to mention the TJ Hockenson injury and now there's one less guy to compete with, I'm not very sure they're going to be as heavy of a passing approach as they were last season to begin with. They also went out and acquired Aaron Jones, who is a legit threat at the running back position that they just simply did not have last year to help them get up and down in field and punch the ball into the end zone with. Another factor is you have to remember that even without Kirk Cousins last year, they were battling for a playoff spot for a majority of the year until it became quite obvious at the end of the season that they weren't going to make it, which led to them passing the ball a lot more to try and stay in those close games. Maybe that won't be the case this year with either Sam Darnold or rookie J.J. McCarthy. And moving on, if we just want to take a look at Jordan Addison's underlying metrics last year, they really weren't great, recording just a 1.57 yards per route run, which would have been good for 53rd in the NFL last season. He also only had an 18% target share last year, while being 12th in routes run in the NFL. So how much can we expect that to truly jump this season? Especially when you factor in that included a bunch of games without Justin Jefferson. So even without the best wide receiver in football on the field, he wasn't earning targets at a high level. So can we expect that to be the case in 2024 with Justin Jefferson on the field and a quarterback that's either going to be Sam Darnold or a rookie? I'm not so sure. So at his current price, I'm fading Jordan Addison, and I would much rather take the other guys in his range over him. At number 4, I have Jaylen Warren, and I know this one's going to be controversial, and I hate putting him on this list because I absolutely love Jaylen Warren. I think he's so dynamic, he's explosive, and I truly think he's the best running back in that Pittsburgh Steelers running back room. However, he's currently going off the board as running back 24th and 88th overall, and I simply don't see running back 24 in Jaylen Warren's range of outcomes in 2024. This is a guy who last season was 29th in fantasy points per game at the running back position, and I know the underlying metrics are absolutely fantastic because he's a stud and he's electric, but I just truly don't see the upside. Like, for me, what is really the upside here? This is a guy who isn't going to score a ton of touchdowns, considering he only has 5 total so far in his 2-year career. And this is a Steelers offense who is currently projected to be 9th worst scoring offense in the NFL. So if he's not going to be scoring touchdowns, what are we really projecting here? A massive workload or significant uptick in volume? I simply don't see that happening. And even if it were to happen, how valuable will those touches really be? The Steelers still have Najee Harris on this roster, and he's going to be seeing a significant amount of carries, which unfortunately ultimately caps the upside of Jaylen Warren. I also believe that Najee Harris is a much more and pure fit in Arthur Smith's scheme than Jaylen Warren is. If we just take a look back at some of the guys that Arthur Smith has helped his fantasy relevance as his time as a play caller, is a short list of guys that includes, of course, Derrick Henry in those years with the Tennessee Titans, and then Tyler Algier. There's no doubt in my mind that Najee Harris is much more similar to those guys than Jaylen Warren is. And Smith clearly has a type, which we've all found out the hard way. While I still fully expect Jaylen Warren to have involvement in this offense, I don't expect it to be a massive role whatsoever. And more importantly, I don't expect it to be the goal line and red zone role, which unfortunately significantly caps his upside in this best ball format, in my opinion. So while it's unfortunate because he is such a good player, he's so dynamic, and all his metrics would tell you that he's one of the better running backs in the NFL, I simply can't justify drafting him at his current ADP over guys like Zach Moss, James Conner, or DeAndre Swift, who are going to be the primary backs and much better offenses this upcoming season. Moving on to number 5, I have Devin Singletary, currently going off the board as running back 34 and 112 overall. Another guy where I just simply don't understand what the upside here is. This is a guy who last year was just RB36 in fantasy points per game while being the workhorse back for one of the absolute best offenses in all of football in the Houston Texans. Now he gets to be the workhorse on one of not only the worst offenses in all of football, but one of the worst teams in all of football with one of the worst O-lines in all of football. So what are we really doing here? What is a good week for Devin Singletary look like in this Giants offense? 15 for 54 and maybe a touchdown? Those aren't the guys I'm chasing in this format. And that's the other thing as well. How many high leverage touches in the red zone and the goal line is Devin Singletary really going to see? This is currently a Giants offense that's projected to be the 4th lowest scoring offense in the NFL right now. Yet he's going around of or ahead of guys like Tyjae Spears, Blake Corum, Gus Edwards, Ezekiel Elliott, Jerome Ford, Chase Brown. Those are all guys who are in much better situations on much better offenses with potential to absolutely explode if one or two things breaks their way. So I just simply don't understand it. There isn't a thing that would ever get me excited or ready to draft Devin Singletary at any point of a best ball draft, no matter what. He's also not an explosive back who can make things happen for himself by any means, ranking 34th in yards after contact, 28th in yards created, 39th in yards per touch, and 21st in breakaway run rate. So on an offense with a egregious O-line, you also have a running back who's not known for creating himself. Just a terrible fit in my opinion. And like I said, all those metrics were while playing on one of the best offenses in the league last season. And now he probably gets the biggest downgrade of situation of any skill position player that switched teams in free agency this year. I'm not sure there's a player I could be more out on this season than Devin Singletary at his current cost in these best ball formats. And even if he were to drop a full round or two, I'm not sure I would be any way excited to hit that draft button for him if the time came. Moving on, number 6, my final player, I have TJ Hockenson, currently going off the board as tight end 16 and 146 overall. And I promise you I'm not a Minnesota Vikings hater. I actually dislike Addison and Hockenson for 2 complete different reasons. To me, the selection of TJ Hockenson here just feels like you're straight up taking a pick and lighting it on fire with where he's going in drafts. TJ Hockenson tore both his ACL and MCL on Christmas Eve of 2023. Multiple ligament knee injury that, of course, required knee surgery. As we can see here in this tweet from Jeff Muller, sorry if I butchered that, on Twitter, that the ideal return time for a multi-ligament knee injury has been around 10 months, which would be week 13 when the Vikings have a bye. So there's a legit chance here that we aren't seeing TJ Hockenson on an NFL field this season until week 14. And even then, how much can we really expect from him? What will his production really be like? How limited will he be? Because we know you won't see a large sum of the snaps day one when he comes back. So how much can we really expect here? And when he comes back, he will be stepping into a situation with either Sam Darnold or a rookie in J.J. McCarthy at the helm. Not only are we unsure of what to expect from those two guys in 2024, those are two guys he will have 0 offseason practices with, 0 training camp reps with, and then, of course, minimal practice reps with. So what will that chemistry be like with him in the starting offense and those quarterbacks? Will the targets be there? I'm not so sure. He will also presumably be battling with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and even Aaron Jones for targets when he gets back as well, assuming all those guys stay healthy by week 14. So I really just don't understand how much upside there truly is here at all, if any, from TJ Hockenson in 2024. He's also currently going ahead of 2 starting tight ends that I would much prefer at this point in Luke Musgrave and Hunter Henry, and then in other players like like Matthew Stafford and Jermaine Burton. I would just much prefer those options at their price over an injured player and a questionable situation like TJ Hockenson. I'm just very worried about the price you have to pay, especially because I see a lot of guys going elite tight end and then backing that up with a TJ Hockenson as their second and only tight end in this format. And for me, that is just not something I would be doing. I just think as a whole in 2024, TJ Hockenson's upside and possibly even floor is majorly capped, and I'm not exactly sure that's the type of guy you want as your number 2 tight end, especially when he comes back in the fantasy playoffs. So you currently couldn't get me to draft him at this point in the draft. But yeah, that's it for you guys today. Those are the 6 players I absolutely refuse to draft. I'll have another one coming out soon where I start to preview my redraft rankings and how I feel about players going into the season. So stay tuned, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thanks.